You think too deeply and it's slowly destroying you, Carl Jung. There's a strange kind of pain that doesn't show up in physical wounds. It doesn't scream for attention like a broken bone or a bleeding cut. Instead, it whispers in quiet rooms. It lingers in sleepless nights and endless thoughts. It buries itself in overanalysis, in the compulsion to understand every emotion, every interaction, every possibility of what could have happened or what might be. And if you're watching this, there's a good chance you felt it. The constant thinking, the overthinking, the exhausting mental loops that never seem to end. And what's worse, it feels rational. It feels like you're just trying to make sense of life. You're trying to be self-aware. You're trying to understand yourself and everything around you. But what if I told you that this very process, the act of thinking too deeply, might be the thing that's slowly destroying you from the inside out? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's what deep thinkers often try to do. We dive into the unconscious. We poke around in the dark. We try to retrieve meaning from the chaos. But somewhere along the way, we start drowning in our own findings. We mistake reflection for progress. We confuse dissection for healing. And we believe that if we can just understand everything, we'll finally be free. But let me ask you something. How many hours have you spent thinking about something that still hasn't changed? How many times have you replayed a memory, analyzed a conversation, or questioned your own motives only to end up more confused, more anxious, more paralyzed than before?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
The problem isn't that you think deeply. Deep thinking is a gift. The problem is that we've romanticized it to the point of self-destruction. We've turned introspection into an identity. We've made pain our proof of insight. And in doing so, we've lost touch with the most basic truths of being alive. That life doesn't want to be solved. It wants to be lived. Jung understood this better than most. He didn't see the psyche as a puzzle to be completed, but as a living system, one that grows, evolves, and expresses itself through symbols, archetypes, dreams, and instincts. He didn't believe in dissecting the soul like a machine. He believed in engaging it like a myth, a mystery, a force of nature. And yet, many of us don't live that way. We treat our inner world like a courtroom. We judge every emotion. We interrogate every impulse. We try to trace every feeling back to its origin, as if knowing why we feel something will magically make it go away. But does it? Or do we just get stuck in an infinite cycle of interpretation, while real life, raw, messy, and beautifully unexplainable, passes us by? Here's the paradox. The more you try to understand everything, the more disconnected you become from the experience itself. It's like watching a sunset and trying to calculate its beauty in pixels and light refraction. The data might be accurate, but the feeling, the awe, it vanishes. And that's what happens when we overthink our lives. We rob ourselves of presence. We turn living into a mental exercise. We become so obsessed with meaning that we forget how to feel. Jung warned about this. He called it the inflation of the intellect. When the thinking function becomes dominant, we disconnect from the body, the emotions, and the instincts. We become fragmented. We live in our heads, cut off from the wisdom of the heart and the gut. And slowly, we start to suffer not just psychologically, but physically. The body tenses, sleep becomes shallow, joy feels foreign, because we're no longer in ourselves. We're hovering above, analyzing everything, trying to optimize every interaction, trying to fix what maybe was never broken. But you might ask, isn't self-awareness a good thing? Isn't thinking deeply what makes us human? And the answer is yes, up to a point. Self-awareness is essential, but obsession is not. Depth is powerful, but getting lost in the depths without knowing how to return to the surface, that's dangerous, and that's where many of us are stuck. We've gone so far inward that we've become trapped in our own minds, and now we don't know how to reconnect with reality. So what's the way out? It begins with a shift, a radical rebalancing. You stop treating thought as the ultimate authority. You start listening to your body again. You begin to feel without dissecting. You allow yourself to act without always knowing why. You return to instinct, to movement, to presence. Jung believed that healing doesn't happen through analysis alone. It happens through integration, through bringing the unconscious into conscious awareness, not to control it, but to partner with it, to trust it, to dance with it. And maybe that's the deepest wisdom of all, that the mind was never meant to carry the entire weight of your soul. That some things are meant to be lived, not understood. That some questions are more powerful unanswered. And that perhaps the part of you trying to think your way to peace just needs to be reminded that you are already whole. Overthinking is a spiritual disease. How Jung's shadow theory explains your inner chaos. There's a point where thinking stops being a tool and becomes a trap. You don't even notice it happening. At first, it feels like insight, like clarity. You're analyzing your past, your choices, your feelings, and you believe you're peeling back the layers. But then something strange happens. Instead of feeling lighter, you feel heavier. Instead of becoming more free, you begin to feel more stuck, more uncertain, more overwhelmed. That's because overthinking isn't just a mental habit, it's a spiritual disease. And Carl Jung knew this better than anyone. He saw that when we overanalyze ourselves, especially without the right tools, we don't bring more light into our lives. We actually start to feed the darkness. Jung's concept of the shadow explains this perfectly. The shadow is the part of ourselves that we repress, deny, or avoid. It's made up of everything we don't want to admit exists within us: anger, jealousy, selfishness, fear, insecurity. But here's the twist. Overthinking often becomes the perfect disguise for avoiding the shadow. We think if we can intellectualize our emotions enough, we won't have to feel them. If we can understand our trauma, we won't have to actually face it. But the shadow isn't fooled by logic. It lives in the body, in the unconscious, in the places that thinking can't reach. So the more we think, the more we escape. And the more we escape, the more chaotic our inner world becomes. Jung warned that the unintegrated shadow doesn't just stay hidden, it leaks out. It shows up in passive-aggressive behavior, in irrational fears, in self-sabotage. It whispers in your mind late at night. It turns self-reflection into self-attack. It's the reason you can't stop replaying that memory from 10 years ago. It's the reason you read every text message 10 times looking for hidden meaning. It's the reason you can't trust joy without dissecting it. Because deep down, you're not just thinking, you're avoiding. And your shadow knows it. This is why overthinking often leads to anxiety, depression, and disconnection. We believe we're just being thoughtful, but what we're really doing is circling around our pain instead of walking into it. We keep ourselves in mental motion so we never have to sit still with the truth. But Jung would tell you, the only way out is through. The only way to escape the chaos is to integrate the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. To meet your inner darkness, not with judgment, but with curiosity, with courage, with humility. And this isn't just psychological, it's deeply spiritual. Because what is the soul if not the totality of who we are, not just the parts we like? When you overthink, you're often trying to avoid the parts of yourself that feel inconvenient to your ego. But your soul isn't interested in your ego's comfort. It's interested in your wholeness, and wholeness requires darkness. It requires contradiction. It requires that you stop trying to solve yourself like a problem and instead start to accept yourself like a mystery. Let me ask you something deeply uncomfortable. What part of you have you been trying to think away? What emotion are you analyzing instead of feeling? What memory are you studying because you're too afraid to grieve it? These are the questions that lead to real healing. Not more thinking, not more strategies, but honest confrontation. This is the spiritual work, the shadow work. And it's not glamorous. It's not always satisfying, but it's real and it's necessary. Jung believed that true transformation only comes when we bring the unconscious into the light. But light doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from turning toward what we fear, from choosing to feel the pain we've been trying to explain away, from recognizing that wholeness doesn't mean perfect clarity, it means radical acceptance. So if your thoughts are spiraling, if your mind feels like a maze with no exit, maybe it's not because you haven't thought enough. Maybe it's because you've thought too much and felt too little. Maybe it's time to stop analyzing and start listening. Listening to the body, to the dreams, to the emotions you've labeled as irrational. Because in Jung's world, those irrational parts often carry the deepest truth. And here's the most ironic part. Once you stop trying to fix yourself through thinking, the healing begins. Once you allow the shadow to speak, it stops screaming. Once you stop resisting your feelings, they stop drowning you. And in that space beyond analysis, beyond control, you find a kind of peace that thinking can never give. A peace that comes not from solving the self, but from embracing it. The mind is not always your friend. Why logic alone can't save you from suffering. We've been taught to trust the mind. From the moment we begin to reason, we're told it's our greatest asset. Think before you act. Analyze the consequences. Use your head. And its true logic has brought humanity incredible achievements. We've built machines, decoded the universe, mapped the genome. But when it comes to the internal world, the fragile, chaotic, sacred nature of the human soul, logic often fails. Worse, it can become the very thing that deepens our suffering. Because what happens when you try to apply reason to something inherently unreasonable? What happens when you use intellect to solve heartbreak? When you try to decode grief or reduce anxiety to a formula? You might feel in control for a while, but eventually you hit a wall, because life at its core is not a math equation. It's a paradox. And the more you try to control it with logic alone, the more it slips through your fingers. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He understood that the psyche is not a machine to be optimized. It's a wild, living ecosystem. And the mind, sharp, brilliant, analytical, is only one part of it. When the mind becomes the dictator, everything else, emotion, instinct, intuition, sensation, gets suppressed. And what's suppressed doesn't disappear. It rebels in subtler, more destructive ways. You might convince yourself that you've moved on from something because you've rationalized it, but your body still tightens when you hear that name. Your heart still races at the memory. Your dreams still whisper the truth you're too clever to face. That's the trap of the overactive mind. It gives you the illusion of mastery, while your deeper self remains unheard. Let me ask you something personal. How many times have you tried to reason your way out of pain? How many nights have you spent replaying the same situation, hoping that if you just thought about it the right way, it would hurt less? How many times have you said, I know it doesn't make sense, but I can't stop feeling this way? That's the voice of the soul trying to break through the tyranny of logic. And if you ignore it long enough, it will find other ways to be heard through burnout, through depression, through panic attacks, through a sense of meaninglessness that no amount of thinking can cure. This is why Jung placed such emphasis on symbols, dreams, myths, forms of communication that bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the unconscious. He understood that the deepest truths are not always spoken in the language of logic. They're felt, they're intuited, they're experienced in the body, in the silence, in the space between thoughts. And if you're always thinking, always analyzing, always trying to figure it out, you miss those moments. You drown them out. You become a prisoner of your own intelligence. The mind is a beautiful servant, but a dangerous master. It can help you plan, create, solve, but it cannot feel for you. It cannot heal your wounds. It cannot tell you who you are at your core. That knowledge lives elsewhere in the heart, in the gut, in the part of you that existed long before you could think in words. And if you want real peace, if you want real clarity, you have to learn how to listen to that part again. You have to learn to live beyond the mind. This doesn't mean abandoning logic. It means putting it in its proper place. It means using thought as a tool, not as your identity. It means recognizing that not everything that's true can be explained. That some things like love or loss or longing are meant to be honored, not solved. So here's the challenge. Can you let go of the need to understand everything? Can you sit with a feeling without dissecting it? Can you choose presence over control? These are not easy things to do, especially for those of us who've built our safety around our intellect, but they're necessary if we want to feel fully alive. Because the truth is, the mind can keep you safe, but it can also keep you small. It can protect you from pain, but it can also protect you from joy. And eventually, you have to decide, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? The cure is not clarity, it's connection. How to return to yourself when thinking fails. The greatest mistake we often make is believing that clarity is the cure. That if we could just understand everything, if we could just think our way into the perfect perspective, we would finally find peace. But peace does not come from perfect logic. Peace comes from connection. Connection to yourself, to your body, to others, to the present moment. And this is something Carl Jung understood profoundly. True transformation doesn't come from solving yourself like a riddle. It comes from reconnecting with the parts of you that thinking has slowly pushed into the shadows. When we overthink, we disconnect. We disconnect from the body because we stop listening to its signals. We disconnect from our emotions because we try to control, suppress, or analyze them into silence. We disconnect from people because we're so busy interpreting their intentions, crafting the perfect response, or projecting our fears that we forget how to just be with them. And worst of all, we disconnect from ourself, not the identity we've built in our head, but the deeper, quieter self that exists beneath all the noise. This is why clarity alone will never be enough. Because even if you understand your trauma, even if you can explain your anxieties, even if you map out every pattern in your life with perfect precision, what good is it if you still feel alone? What good is it if you still wake up with a hollow ache in your chest? What good is it if you can name your wounds but have no idea how to heal them? Healing begins not when you understand more, but when you feel safe enough to come home to yourself. When you stop escaping into thought and start returning to presence. When you stop intellectualizing your sadness and let yourself cry. When you stop explaining your loneliness and let someone see it. Connection is not a concept to understand, it's an experience to surrender to. So how do we return to connection when the mind is in overdrive? We begin with the body. We breathe. We feel. We slow down. The body is always in the present. It doesn't care about yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's uncertainty. It only knows now. And when we re-enter the body, we re-enter ourselves. We stop floating above reality and start grounding into it. Next, we reconnect with others not through performance, but through presence. You don't need the perfect thing to say. You just need to be real. Vulnerability is connection. And often the thing that breaks the cycle of overthinking is a single moment of honest contact where someone sees you, hears you, and reminds you that you're not alone in your mind. And lastly, we reconnect with something greater than ourselves. Call it soul, call it God, call it life, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you remember. You are not just a mind. You are not just a problem to be solved. You are part of something vast, mysterious, and beautiful. And the more you surrender to that mystery, the more peace you will find. Carl Jung believed that wholeness is the goal, not perfection, not certainty, not control. Wholeness means accepting that you are both light and dark, rational and emotional, knowing and unknowing. It means living with paradox. It means letting go of the need to fix yourself and instead learning to befriend yourself. So maybe the final question is this: can you stop trying to think your way to peace and allow yourself to simply be? Can you open the door to your own presence and trust that you're not broken, just disconnected? Because the truth is, you don't need more answers. You need more aliveness. You need more love. You need more moments where you stop thinking and start experiencing. The cure is not clarity. The cure is connection. And connection begins the moment you realize you were never as lost as you thought. You just forgot how to come home.